The Grand Hall of the Corvan Dominion stretched for nearly a mile in every direction, its vaulted ceilings disappearing into shadows where floating lights drifted like captive stars. And Claire Morrison stood among creatures that towered over her by several feet, watching them laugh at her species with barely concealed amusement. She had been assigned to Ambassador Daniel Vance 3 months ago, serving as his primary security attaché during humanity's first major diplomatic mission to the Corvan homeworld. And in that time, she had grown accustomed to the looks of contempt that followed her. Everywhere she walked, the Corvans were massive beings, averaging 7 feet tall with scaled skin that shimmered like polished metal and eyes that glowed with bioluminescent intensity. And they ruled one of the most powerful military alliances in the known galaxy, which made their opinion of humanity particularly important for Earth's future. Among the stars, Ambassador Vance moved through the reception with practiced grace, his silver hair and calm demeanor projecting exactly the kind of dignified authority that humanity needed to display. But Claire could see the tension in his shoulders every time a Corvan diplomat dismissed his words with a wave of their clawed hand. "They do not take us seriously," Vance murmured to her as they paused near a refreshment table that offered nothing edible for human biology. "And I am running out of ways to make them listen." Claire nodded but said nothing, her eyes scanning the room out of habit, noting exits and potential threats and the body language of every alien within striking distance, because that was what she had been trained to do since she was 19 years old. The sound of heavy footsteps drew her attention to the center of the hall, where a Corvan larger than any she had seen before was pushing through the crowd with the confidence of someone who had never been challenged in his entire life. Commander Zorath Vel stood nearly 8 feet tall, his natural scales augmented with cybernetic plating that hummed with barely contained energy, and the crowd parted before him like water before the bow of a warship. "I hear the humans have come begging for our protection," Zorath announced in a voice that carried across the entire hall, silencing conversations and drawing every eye to where he stood. "And I wonder what they could possibly offer in return for the honor of standing beside the Corvan Dominion." Ambassador Vance stepped forward with his hands raised in a gesture of peace, his voice steady despite the insult that hung in the air between them. "We come seeking partnership, Commander, not protection," Vance replied. "And humanity has much to offer any alliance wise enough to accept us as equals." Zorath threw back his head and laughed, a sound like grinding metal that echoed off the distant walls. And dozens of other Corvans joined him until the entire hall rang with their mockery. "Equals," Zorath repeated when his laughter finally subsided. "You dare speak of equality when your species cannot even survive without artificial environments on half the worlds you colonize. When your bodies break from impacts that would merely annoy a Corvan child. When you have been among the stars for barely 2 centuries, while we have ruled for 10,000 years. Claire felt her jaw tighten but kept her expression neutral, watching as Zorath moved closer to where she and the ambassador stood. "I have a proposal," Zorath continued, his glowing eyes sweeping across the human delegation with obvious contempt. "The Dominion hosts the Tournament of Champions each cycle, where warriors from across the galaxy compete for honor and standing. And I challenge any human to face me in the arena tomorrow." The hall fell silent as every alien present turned to stare at the small group of humans near the refreshment table. "If your champion can last even 30 seconds against me, I will personally advocate for humanity's inclusion in our alliance," Zorath said, his mandibles spreading in what Claire recognized as a Corvan smile. "But when your champion falls, and they will fall, you will leave Corvan space and never return." Ambassador Vance opened his mouth to respond, but before he could speak, Claire stepped forward. "I accept," she said, her voice clear and calm in the sudden silent. Jezereth turned to look at her, and for a moment, confusion flickered across his alien features as he processed what had just happened. "You," he said, Leaning down to examine her more closely, the small female who carries no weapons and wears no armor. "You wish to face me in the arena?" "I do," Claire replied without hesitation. Laughter erupted again, louder this time, as aliens throughout the hall pointed at the human woman who had just volunteered for what they clearly considered suicide. Ambassador Vance grabbed Claire's arm and pulled her back, his face pale with concern. "Claire, what are you doing?" he whispered urgently. "He will kill you. This is not what we came here for." "With respect, Ambassador." "This is exactly what we came here for," Claire replied quietly. "They will never take us seriously until we show them what we are capable of. And talking will not accomplish that." Zorath had recovered from his surprise and was now watching the exchange between the two humans with renewed amusement. "Let her come," he called out. "Let the female prove that humans have at least one among them with courage, even if that courage is born from ignorance of what awaits her." A Corvan official approached with a datapad, his expression carefully neutral as he presented it to Claire. "The combat waiver," he explained. "Signing this releases the Dominion from responsibility for any injuries or death that may occur during the match." Claire took the datapad and pressed her thumb against the signature field without reading a single word of the document. She does not even read it. Zorath observed to the crowd, "Either very brave or very foolish. And tomorrow we will discover which." He turned to leave, then paused and looked back over his massive shoulder at the small human woman who had dared to challenge him. "I want you to know that I will not hold back," he said, his voice dropping to something almost intimate despite how far it carried. "I will not slow my strikes or soften my blows because you are small and fragile, and when you fall, I will make certain the galaxy remembers what happens when lesser species forget their place." Claire met his glowing eyes without flinching. "I look forward to it." "Commander," Sadrath stared at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression that might have been curiosity or might have been the first faint stirring of doubt. And then he turned and walked away. The crowd parting before him once more. Ambassador Vance stood beside Claire as the reception slowly resumed around them, his face a mask of barely controlled anxiety. "You had better know what you are doing," he said quietly. Claire watched Zorath's retreating form until he disappeared through a distant doorway. And when she finally spoke, her voice carried a certainty that surprised even herself. "I do," she said. And for the first time since arriving on the Corvan homeworld, she allowed herself to smile. The arena floor was made of compacted sand mixed with some kind of metallite that sparkled under the floating lights. And Claire stood at its center with her feet planted shoulder-width apart and her hands hanging loose at her. Zorath circled her slowly, his massive form casting a shadow that swept across her like a passing storm. And the crowd watched in breathless anticipation of the violence that was about to unfold. "I want you to know," Zorath called out, his voice carrying easily across the vast space, "that I respect your courage, even if it is misplaced, and I will try to make your death as quick as my honor allows." Claire said nothing, her eyes tracking his movement with the calm focus of someone watching leaves drift across a pond. Zorath stopped circling and raised his Railbolt pistol, the weapon humming as its magnetic accelerators charged to full power. "Last chance to surrender, human," he offered. Though they both knew the words were merely ritual, Claire shifted her weight slightly, her body relaxing into a stance that looked almost casual to the untrained eye. And something in the back of Zorath's mind whispered that he was missing something important. He fired. The Railbolt round left the barrel at 17,000 meters per second, a hypervelocity projectile designed to punch through starship armor, aimed directly at Claire's left leg with the intention of crippling her before the killing. Below Claire moved, it was not a dodge in any way that Zorath understood the word, not a desperate leap or a frantic dive to escape the incoming round, but rather a subtle shift of her entire body, a flowing adjustment that placed her exactly where the bolt was not. the round screamed past her leg, missing by less than an inch, and buried itself in the arena wall behind her with enough force to send cracks spiderwebbing through the stone. The crowd gasped as one. Thousands of voices crying out in shock at what they had just witnessed. Zarth stared at the human female, his mind struggling to process what had happened, because the targeting systems built into his cybernetic eyes had told him the shot was perfect, had calculated the trajectory and her position, and confirmed the hit before he even pulled the trigger. She should be on the ground screaming, her leg destroyed by the impact, but instead she stood exactly where she had been standing, her expression unchanged, her breathing steady. "How?" Zorth demanded. But he did not wait for an answer before firing again. This time he aimed for her shoulder, and this time he watched more carefully, his enhanced vision tracking every microsecond of the shot. Claire moved again. That same impossibly fluid adjustment, and the bolt passed through the space where her shoulder had been a fraction of a second earlier. Zorth fired 3 more times in rapid succession, aiming center mass with each shot, and each time Claire shifted just enough to let the rounds pass harmlessly by. Her movements so precise that the bolts seemed to curve around her, even though they traveled in perfectly straight lines. The arena had gone completely silent now, every alien watching with expressions that ranged from disbelief to something approaching fear, because they were witnessing something that should not be possible. "What are you?" Zorth growled, his fingers tightening on his weapon. Claire tilted her head slightly, a gesture that somehow conveyed both patience and absolute confidence. "I am human," she replied. Zorth roared and switched his weapon to automatic fire, unleashing a stream of Railbolt rounds that filled the air between them with hypersonic death. Dozens of projectiles screaming toward the small human woman in a barrage that should have torn her apart. Claire began to move. It was like watching water flow downhill, her body bending and shifting and turning in ways that seemed to anticipate each round before it arrived, her feet barely leaving the sand as she flowed through the storm of projectiles. Like a leaf dancing between raindrops, a betting screen in the corner of the arena displayed a timer, and the crowd watched in stunned silence as the seconds ticked past 12, then 15, then 20. The human still standing, still moving, still completely untouched. Zar's weapon clicked empty, and he stood there panting with exertion, staring at the impossible creature before him. "This is a trick," he snarled, ejecting the spent magazine and slamming a fresh one into place. "Some kind of technology, some alien enhancement. You cannot be doing this with merely human ability." Claire stopped moving and stood still again, her breathing only slightly elevated despite the dance she had just performed. "No technology," she said, her voice carrying clearly in the silent arena. "No enhancement. Just millions of years of evolution on a world where everything wanted to kill us." She took a single step toward Zorth, and the massive Corvin actually stepped back before he caught himself. "Humans survived on Earth not because we were the strongest predators, but because we learned to see death coming and move out of its way," Claire continued. "Our brains evolved to predict and avoid danger faster than conscious thought. And when that ability is trained and refined, this is what it becomes." Zorth charged, abandoning his ranged weapon for the claws and blades built into his cybernetic arms, determined to end this humiliation with brutal close-quarters violence. Claire did not retreat. Instead, she moved forward to meet him, flowing around his first slash, redirecting his second strike so that his own momentum carried him past her. And when he spun to face her again, she was already inside his guard with her palm pressed against his chest. She could have killed him in that moment, her position perfect for a strike to a dozen vulnerable points. But instead, she simply pushed, adding her strength to his existing momentum and sending him stumbling backward. Zorth caught himself and charged again. And again, Claire redirected his attacks, using his own power against him, her movements so perfectly timed that each of his strikes seemed to defeat itself. He threw a punch with enough force to crush stone, and she guided it past her head so that he overextended, then stepped on his forward foot so that when he tried to recover, he fell to one knee. He slashed with his arm blades, and she ducked beneath them while simultaneously sweeping his other leg, sending him crashing to the sand. The timer on the betting screen showed 2 minutes and 37 seconds, more than 5 times longer than any bet had predicted. And the greatest warrior of the Corvan Dominion lay on his back with a human woman standing over him. Claire had not thrown a single offensive blow. Every wound on Zorath's body, every dent in his armor, every drop of blood that stained the sand beneath him, had come from his own redirected attacks. She stepped back and waited for him to rise, her expression still calm, still patient, as if she had all the time in the universe. The crowd began to murmur, then to speak, then to shout. Thousands of voices crying out in languages from across the galaxy, all of them asking the same question. What was this creature that looked so fragile and fought like flowing water? And what did it mean that such beings had come to the stars? The preparation chamber beneath the arena was cold and bare, with walls of gray stone and a single light that cast harsh shadows across the floor. And Claire sat alone on a metal bench with her eyes closed and her breathing slow and steady above her. She could hear the rumble of thousands of aliens filing into the arena, their footsteps and voices creating a constant vibration that she could feel through the stone beneath her feet. And she knew that every single one of them had come to watch her die. She let her mind drift backward through the years, past her assignment to the diplomatic corps, past her tours of duty on 6 colony worlds, all the way back to where everything had truly begun. The facility had been located deep underground in the mountains of Colorado, a place that officially did not exist, where she had been taken at 19, after psychological evaluations and physical assessments had flagged her as a candidate for something called Project Kinetic. They had told her that humanity was preparing for first contact, that the governments of Earth had detected signals from the stars and knew that aliens were real, and that someone needed to be ready to face whatever challenges that contact might bring. For 5 years she had trained in a discipline that the instructors called flow combat, an art that combined ancient martial techniques with cutting-edge research into human neurology and the nature of predictive movement, the human brain. They had explained to her during endless hours of classroom instruction, was capable of processing visual information and predicting trajectories far faster than conscious thought could follow. And the key to flow combat was learning to trust that unconscious processing completely. Most beings in the galaxy relied on speed and strength and armor to win their battles. But humans had survived on Earth not because they were the fastest or the strongest, but because they could anticipate danger before it arrived, because their minds could calculate the path of a striking predator and move their bodies out of harm's way in the split second. Before impact flow combat took that natural ability and refined it into something extraordinary, teaching practitioners to enter a state of heightened awareness where the conscious mind stepped back and allowed the deeper, faster parts of the brain to take control. Claire had spent years learning to trust her instincts completely, to move without thinking, to become like water that flows around obstacles rather than crashing into them. The sound of the chamber door opening pulled her back to the present, and she looked up to see Ambassador Vance standing in the doorway with worry written clearly across his face. "The match begins in 20 minutes, he said, stepping inside and letting the door close behind him. "And I have been trying to find a way to get you out of this. But the Corvans consider the challenge sacred, and refusing now would be seen as an even greater insult than accepting it." Claire rose from the bench and began stretching, her muscles with slow, deliberate movements. "I did not accept the challenge because I wanted a way out," she said calmly. "I accepted it because it was necessary." Vance shook his head, his frustration evident in every line of his body. "Claire, Zorath has killed 17 opponents in this arena. beings far larger and better armed than you, and he has never lost. Not once in his entire career. Then he has never faced a human. Claire replied. The ambassador moved closer, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. I have read his file, Claire. He fights with a Railbolt pistol that fires projectiles at hypersonic velocities. Rounds that can pierce starship armor, and you plan to walk into that arena with no weapons and no protection. Please tell me you have some kind of plan. Claire finished her stretching and turned to face him directly, her expression serene in a way that seemed to unsettle him even more. The Corvins and every other species in this galaxy judge strength by physical power and technological superiority, she said. They look at us and see small, fragile creatures who should never have survived long enough to reach the stars. And they cannot understand how we did it. She paused, her eyes distant for a moment, as if seeing something far beyond the stone walls of the chamber. Humanity did not conquer Earth because we were the apex predators, she continued. We conquered it because we learned to see danger coming and move out of its way. Because we developed the ability to predict and adapt faster than any other species on our planet. And that ability did not disappear when we left our homeworld behind. Vance stared at her, clearly struggling to understand. You think you can dodge Railbolt rounds, he said, his tone suggesting he thought she had lost her mind. I think I can be somewhere other than where the rounds are going, Claire replied with a faint smile. Which is not quite the same thing. Before Vance could respond, a deep horn sounded from somewhere above them, its reverberations shaking dust from the ceiling and signaling that the match was about to begin. Claire walked to the doorway that led to the arena, then paused and looked back at the ambassador. Whatever happens up there, remember why we came to the stars, she said, not to hide from the galaxy, but to show them who we really are. She stepped through the doorway and into a tunnel that sloped upward toward a bright light, the roar of the crowd growing louder with every step she took. Meanwhile, in another preparation chamber on the opposite side of the arena, Commander Zorath Vel finished charging his Railbolt pistol and checked its ammunition for the third time. His cybernetic enhancements humming with anticipation, his subordinates stood nearby, their expressions eager as they discussed how quickly the human female would fall. I give her 5 seconds, one of them said with a laugh. Maybe 10 if she runs. Zorath did not join their laughter, his mind lingering on the moment when the human had accepted his challenge. The absolute certainty in her eyes that had seemed so out of place in such a small and fragile creature. She did not hesitate, he murmured, more to himself than to his companions. When I challenged her, she did not even pause to consider. Because she is ignorant, another subordinate replied dismissively. She does not understand what she faces. Zorath was not so certain, but he pushed the doubt aside as the arena horn sounded again, signaling that it was time for him to take his place. He walked through his own tunnel and emerged into the blinding lights of the arena, the crowd erupting into cheers as their champion appeared, and he raised his arms to acknowledge their adoration before turning to face the opposite entrance. A moment later, Claire Morrison walked out of the darkness and into the light. She wore simple combat attire, a fitted gray bodysuit that left her arms and legs free to move, and she carried nothing in her hands, no weapons, no shield, no armor of any kind. The crowd fell silent in confusion, thousands of aliens staring at the small human female, who had apparently come to face their greatest warrior with nothing but her bare hand. Zorath felt his doubt return, stronger this time, because no sane being would enter this arena so utterly unprepared unless they knew something that he did not. But the moment passed, and his confidence reasserted itself, and he raised his Railbolt pistol with a grin spreading across his face. Let us begin, he said. Zorath pushed himself to his feet with a growl of pure frustration, sand falling from his damaged armor as he rose to his full height and faced the human woman, who had humiliated him before the entire Corvin Dominion, his cybernetic systems were flashing warning indicators across his vision, reporting damage to his shoulder servos and stress fractures in his arm plating. All of it caused by his own redirected attacks. "Where are you?" he demanded again, his voice echoing across the silent arena. No being moves like that. No creature can see Railbolt rounds coming and simply choose to be elsewhere. This is not possible. Claire regarded him with something that might have been compassion, though the expression looked strange on the face of someone who had just defeated him so completely. "I already told you," she said. "I am human. And what you just witnessed is nothing more than the result of millions of years of survival on a world that tried to kill us every single day." She took a step toward him, and this time he did not retreat, though his body tensed involuntarily. "Your species evolved on a gentle world, Commander. A planet with stable weather and predictable seasons and no predators, capable of threatening your ancestors once they reached a certain size. And so you developed strength and durability as your primary survival traits." Claire gestured around the arena at the thousands of aliens watching from the stands. Most species in this galaxy followed similar paths, growing larger and stronger and more resilient until they could simply ignore the dangers of their environments. But Earth was different. She paused, her eyes distant as if seeing a world that none of these aliens could imagine. Earth is what your scientists call a death world. A planet where the climate shifts without warning, where predators hunt in every ecosystem from the frozen poles to the burning deserts, where diseases mutate faster than immune systems can adapt, and where the ground itself splits open to swallow entire cities. Zorth listened despite himself, his warrior pride warring with genuine curiosity about this strange small creature who had bested him. Humans could not survive Earth by being the strongest, because we were never the strongest, Claire continued. We survived by developing minds that could predict danger before it arrived, by evolving reflexes that operated faster than conscious thought, and by learning to adapt to any situation, no matter how impossible it seemed. She looked directly at Zorth, and something in her gaze made him feel like she was seeing through all his armor and cybernetics to the mortal being underneath. "What you call impossible is simply what we call Tuesday," she said. And despite the tension of the moment, there was a hint of humor in her voice as Earth felt his rage beginning to cool, replaced by something he had not experienced in decades of combat against every species the galaxy could offer. He felt respect, but his pride would not let him yield so easily, not without understanding exactly what had happened in this arena. "You claim these abilities are natural," he said, "but I have studied human physiology, and your muscles are not strong enough to move at the speeds I witnessed. Your nervous system should not be able to process information quickly enough to dodge hypersonic projectiles." Claire nodded, acknowledging the validity of his observation. "You are correct that my muscles did not move faster than your projectiles," she said, "because I was never trying to outrun them. I was simply choosing not to be where they were going." She shifted into a stance that looked relaxed but somehow conveyed complete readiness. The human brain is capable of processing visual information and calculating trajectories far faster than we consciously realize, she explained. We developed this ability to avoid the strikes of predators and the falling of trees and the thousand other dangers that filled our ancestral environment. She moved slightly, demonstrating the subtle weight shifts that had allowed her to flow through his barrage. Flow combat teaches us to trust that unconscious processing completely, to let go of conscious control and allow our deeper minds to move our bodies out of harm's way, not reacting to what we see, but predicting what we are about to see and positioning ourselves accordingly. The crowd had begun to stir, aliens throughout the arena turning to each other and speaking in urgent whispers, because they were beginning to understand the implications of what they were hearing. Humanity had developed abilities that their own species had never considered. Advantages that could not be countered by bigger weapons or stronger armor. And these small, fragile creatures had been walking among them for years without ever revealing what they were truly capable of. Zoreth processed her words, his tactical mind analyzing everything she had said. And slowly the truth began to settle into his consciousness. He had not lost because of tricks or technology. He had lost because he had underestimated his opponent. Because he had assumed that size and strength and firepower would always triumph. And the human had proven that assumption fatally wrong. If all humans can learn these abilities, he said slowly, then your species is far more dangerous than anyone in this galaxy has realized. Claire shook her head. Not all humans become warriors. And not all warriors train in flow combat, she replied. But the potential exists in every human mind. The ability to adapt and predict and survive against impossible odds. Because that is what evolution shaped us to do. She extended her hand toward him, an open palm that offered neither threat nor submission. Humanity did not come to the stars looking for enemies. Commander, we came looking for equals. Beings who could challenge us and teach us and grow alongside us as we explored the universe together. Zora stared at her hand, understanding the significance of the gesture, knowing that what he did next would be witnessed by thousands of his people, and broadcast across the entire Dominion. He had lost this battle. There was no denying that, but the manner of his defeat had been unlike anything he had experienced before, and there was no dishonor in acknowledging a superior opponent. Slowly, carefully, he reached down and took her hand in his massive clawed grip. You have earned my respect. Human, he said, his voice carrying across the arena. And I admit that the Corvan Dominion has judged you spurely. The crowd erupted into chaos, some cheering, some shouting protests. But Zoreth ignored them all as he looked down at the small woman who had changed everything. I would know your name. Warrior, he said. Claire met his eyes without flinching. The same calm certainty she had displayed throughout the entire encounter. Claire Morrison, she replied. And it was an honor to face you, Commander Zoreth Vel, in the diplomatic box high above the arena floor. Ambassador Daniel Vance watched the scene unfold with tears forming in his eyes, because he understood that humanity had just taken its first real step into the galactic community, not through words or treaties or careful negotiation, but through the simple demonstration of what they truly were: survivors, who had learned to flow like water through any storm that tried to destroy them. The morning after the arena fight, Claire woke to find her communicator filled with messages from species she had never heard of. Representatives from distant worlds who wanted to speak with the human who had defeated Commander Zoreth Vel without throwing a single offensive blow. She ignored most of them and made her way to the medical wing where Zoreth was recovering, his wounds treated by the best physicians the Corvan Dominion had to offer. The guards at the door looked at her with expressions she had not seen before, something between curiosity and wariness, and they stepped aside without a word when she approached Zoreth, set on a treatment bed that barely contained his massive frame, his armor removed to reveal the natural scales beneath. And when he saw Claire enter, something shifted in his glowing eyes. I requested that they inform me if you came, he said, gesturing for her to approach. I have questions that would not leave my mind throughout the night. Claire pulled up a chair that was far too large for her and sat down facing the Corvan champion. Ask them, she said. Simplizereth was quiet for a moment, organizing his thoughts with the same precision he brought to tactical planning. In all my years of combat, I have never faced an opponent who refused to attack, he began. Every being I have fought, from the smallest assassin to the largest war beast, has sought to harm me in return for the harm I inflicted upon them. But you never once struck with the intent to wound. Claire nodded slowly. That was deliberate, she admitted. I could have hurt you many times during our fight, But causing harm was never my goal. Zorath leaned forward, genuine confusion in his expression. Then what was your goal? If not victory through combat, my goal was to show you and everyone watching that humanity is not what you assumed us to be, Claire replied. And the best way to demonstrate that was not through violence, but through control. Through showing that I could have destroyed you at any moment, but chose not to. The Corvan was silent as he processed her words. Among my people, mercy in combat is often seen as weakness, he said finally. A warrior who spares their opponent is thought to lack the conviction to finish what they started. Claire shook her head. Among my people, the greatest warriors are those who never have to fight at all, she said. Because true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the ability to choose when destruction is necessary and when it is not. Zorath considered this for a long moment, then slowly nodded. Your people are strange, Claire Morrison, he said. But I am beginning to think that strange is not the same as weak. Before Claire could respond, the door opened again and a procession of robed figures entered, their elaborate garments marking them as members of the Corvan High Council. Ambassador Vance followed behind them, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes bright with barely contained hope. Commander Zorath Vel, the lead counselor, intoned. The High Council has deliberated throughout the night regarding the events in the arena, and we have reached a decision. Zorath rose from his bed and stood at attention despite his injuries, his respect for the council evident in every line of his body. The human warrior, Claire Morrison, has demonstrated abilities that force us to reconsider our assessment of her species. The counselor continued. She defeated our greatest champion without causing deliberate harm, showing both capability and restraint in measures we have rarely witnessed. The counselor turned to face Claire directly. The Corvan Dominion formally apologizes for our insults toward humanity, he said, and the words seemed to cost him considerable effort. We judge your species by appearances rather than substance, and we were wrong to do so. Claire stood and bowed her head in acknowledgement. The Dominion's apology is accepted, she replied, and humanity looks forward to building a true partnership with your people. The council nodded and continued. Furthermore, the High Council has decided to grant Commander Zorath's original terms. Humanity will be offered a permanent seat in our alliance, with full voting rights and mutual defense obligations. Ambassador Vance stepped forward, his diplomatic training barely containing his excitement. The United Earth government is honored to accept, he said, and we pledge to be worthy partners to the Corvan Dominion and all the species of this alliance. The formal ceremony took another hour, with documents signed and seals applied and witnesses recorded. But eventually, the counselors departed and Claire found herself alone with Zorath and the ambassador. There is one more matter, Zorath said. His voice unusually hesitant, he reached beneath his pillow and withdrew a small medallion on a chain, its surface covered in intricate engravings that Claire did not recognize. This is the mark of the Volkoroth, he explained. The highest honor a warrior of my bloodline can bestow upon a respected opponent. And in 10,000 years of Corvan history, it has never been given to a non-Corvan. He held the medallion out toward Claire. I would be honored if you would accept it. Claire Morrison, as recognition of your skill and your wisdom in wielding that skill with restraint. Claire took the medallion carefully, feeling its weight in her palm. Understanding the significance of what she held, I accept with gratitude, Commander, she said. And I hope this marks the beginning of a friendship between our peoples that will last for generations. 3 days later, Claire stood on the observation deck of the human diplomatic vessel as it prepared to depart Corvan space, watching the alien world shrink behind them as the ship accelerated toward the jump point. Ambassador Vance found her there, 2 cups of coffee in his hands, and offered one to her with a tired smile. The messages have not stopped coming, he said. 17 different species want to open diplomatic relations with Earth, and 5 of them specifically requested to meet the human who fights like flowing water. Claire accepted the coffee and took a long sip before responding. "We did what we came to do," she said. "We showed them who we really are." The door behind them opened, and a young Corvan in training robes entered nervously, looking around the human vessel with obvious fascination. "Forgive the intrusion," the young alien said, "but Commander Zorath arranged for me to travel aboard your ship. He said that I should ask Claire Morrison if she would consider teaching me the way of flow combat." Claire looked at the young Corvan, seeing the same warrior pride that Zorath carried, but tempered with something new. Something that looked almost like humility. "The techniques take years to master," she warned. "And I do not know if Corvan physiology is compatible with our training methods." The young alien straightened to his full height. "Commander Zorath said you would say that," he replied. "And he told me to tell you that Corvans are not afraid of challenges, even ones that seem impossible." Claire considered for a moment, then smiled. "Then we begin tomorrow," she said. "But know this. I will not go easy on you just because you are larger than me." The young Corvan's eyes widened, but he nodded with determination as Claire turned back to the viewport and watched the stars stretch into lines around them. She thought about how far humanity had come since those first terrifying signals from space, and how far they still had to go. They had entered the galaxy expecting to find enemies and had instead found the possibility of friendship. They had been judged by their size and found to be more than the sum of their physical form, and now they were beginning to share the lessons that Earth had taught them, the wisdom that came from surviving a world that never stopped trying to kill them. The galaxy had expected humanity to break under the pressure of contact with stronger, older civilizations instead. They had bent like water around every obstacle, and now they were flowing outward into a universe that was only beginning to understand what that meant. Claire touched the medallion that hung around her neck and smiled. This was only the beginning.